Modified four-cylinder feature, 20 laps.
First night I went there, I was super excited. And I remember a few days before I was going to attend my first race at Summerville, and that was September, I think, 1972, I had a dream about late model racing. And we didn't have a lot of late model racing up north. It was all modified stuff. And I remember in my dream looking at all these late model cars, but they were on trailers in line for Summerville Speedway, you know? And I was excited. But it was like a throwback. Even in those days, it kind of looked like a track out of the late 50s. And I loved it. People didn't have to have $1 million to race there. They had a 6-cylinder division and the 8-cylinder late models. And the grandstands were 3/4 full every week. It was just a wonderful thing, and it was a pretty quick track. It was high banked, and the cars were definitely fast enough to get everybody excited. Everybody had their favorites, like Frank Graham was big, Charlie Powell, and Al Bailey. You know, many more. Arnold Hutto. A lot of them I can't even remember. Hop Holmes had usually the only Ford who was right at the front, but he ran like crazy too. But it was a great track, and a little bit of dust. Dirt fans don't mind dust, and it was wonderful. It was a great time. I love talking to the people and finding out who's driving this car and who runs good in this class. The cars were beautiful. Just I fell in love with that place the first time I saw it. Didn't have to be fancy. Didn't need a $20 million speed plant. Local people could build a car and go there and race, get their start in racing. I bought my first car for Summerville Speedway. I never got to race it, but we kind of took a few laps around Latson. Guarantee you that.
First race or visit to the track? My father raced for years out there with Charlie, and I can't pinpoint when that was because I was probably at the racetrack when I was in diapers. But I would say probably, watching my father race probably somewhere 6, 7, 8 years old. All of us, we'd hang out at, underneath the grandstands and we'd play around underneath the grandstands. We'd play cup ball. I don't know if y'all remember that or not, but we'd play cup ball underneath the grandstands. And realistically, I probably got my first kiss under the grandstands of Summerville Speedway, probably.
Only we know the quiet roads and the vacant malls, or the cool, perfect darkness.
It was a gathering place on Saturday nights for people all over the Tri-County area that were race fans. It was a place to be. That's where people met their wives. That's where people became best friends. That's where you would sit in the parking lot and tailgate before that was a thing. You'd sit in the stands by someone and you'd be pulling for another driver, and all kind of stuff would go down in there. I mean, this place was gone too soon. It was a wonderful place to go on a Saturday night for good entertainment.
Well, community was such a, back then we didn't have, all the video games and all the other things that we have in today's world. you know, we did cool things. You know that. You know, so Summerville Speedway was um, it was a place to go. It was a place to meet. It was a place to uh, for people to get to do something that normal people didn't do. There's not a racetrack in every town, and um, and people work hard for their money, and to be able to come there with friends and as a community, you know, the people that came as fans, which meant so much to us because without fans we wouldn't get sponsored. Without fans we wouldn't, you know, it'd be nothing. You know, I know we spent a little bit of time in the last couple of years with COVID, with things going on without fans in the stands, and that just uh, it just kind of gave it a whole different outlook. But the community in Summerville and the surrounding areas, the Low Country, I mean, people came from all over the place to come to the racetrack. So as far as the community is concerned, um, you know, we had so many local sponsors and so many people that came out every single week that you know, they might have not had, you know, enough money to barely get in the racetrack, but they did. They came to the racetrack because it was a part of what they did and a part of what the community was. Because there's so many things that it did, and then Charlie did so much in the community. The Azalea Festival and stuff. We all brought race cars there, and it was amazing. The people in the parade, the Azalea parade. It was amazing the people that came just to see the race cars and just to see what was going on, and so it meant a lot to them. And in NASCAR anyway, in racing, you know, the fan deal and the sponsors and the products. I mean, people are loyal, so the community was very loyal to Summerville Speedway.
I think about that question, and I think about it in two ways. I think about the community that was part of Summerville Speedway, and I think about the community at large. The community that was part of Summerville Speedway, I mean, lived and died with the place. I mean, it was, Rafe Judd could tell you all about how he, his dad racing, and Ronnie Daniels can tell you all about his family coming out there with him whenever he raced. And I mean, this was a huge family event for the people who competed there. It was kids following dad's footsteps, following granddad's footsteps. And, the track had been around so long, and you had multiple generations of people who were able to compete there one after another. So for the community that competed at Summerville and that was sort of formed the core of Summerville's fan base, I mean, it was an every weekend thing. I mean, it was you just didn't do anything else on those weekends when Summerville was in season, because you knew that was where you were going to be on those Saturday nights. But at the community at large, Brandon, I think that when you maybe get outside of Summerville and a little more toward Charleston, the demographics in Charleston were changing substantially by then. I think you would have been hard pressed to find people outside of Summerville who maybe even knew that track existed. Despite the fact that it appeared in the paper after races and things like that, it just, local racing was already beginning to fall on some hard times. There were more primetime weekend cup races that were taking the kind of spotlight away from the local races and forcing people to make the decision: do I go to a local race this Saturday night, or do I stay at home and watch the cup race from Richmond? And so you already began to have some factors in play that were going to take their toll on short tracks. But also, given you had so many people moving into Charleston from other places, and the place was expanding so much, I don't think it was as top of mind citywide as maybe it had been 20, 30 years earlier. But within that core, it was everything to those guys. I mean, you can almost guarantee those guys, nobody planned a wedding for a Saturday when Summerville Speedway was in season. Nobody planned a vacation for a weekend when Summerville Speedway was in season, because that's all those guys did from, say February to September or October, or however long that track went.
Don't you ever forget it. Never forget it. We are infinite.
I got several, but I guess the biggest memory that I have was the night I won the 2004 championship was paramount to all. it was a great memory, but the last time that we were here, the last race that we raced in, I never will forget that. I remember the whole day. Back in 1999, another memory is a friend of mine. I had not been racing for a while, and I helped him, and he won the big July 4th race. Charlie Powell put on the best fireworks ever. So whatever you were doing was always a big crowd, and I was on the back straightaway in the little street stock division, or whatever they called it. He won the race, and I couldn't have been prouder, and that was another one of my favorite memories. And then we won, me and Robert Powell and our group won $10,000 here one night. I was spotting for, and that was a pretty fair memory. And the night my dad won his first race, I kind of remember that like it was yesterday, you know. So there's so many that are tied for first. It's hard to pick just one.
It was always a fun race coach. I know all the women, you know, the wives, that all the people that worked on the team would they look forward to it every year because they would spend the day in Charleston. And I know all the men, we'd be at the racetrack all day. And you know, I reckon the women really look forward to it every year. And really, you know, we liked it because they were happy. And you know, when the women are happy, everybody's happy. But it was just you know, a good place to go race, and it was somewhere different from here. We got to go, you know, we got tracks here we run 3 or 4 times a year at, and you know, just fun to go off. And it was close to Charleston. I never went to Charleston myself, but I know the women would go out there every year. You know, that always drive different cars, and they would spend the day. And we'd have to, you know, be at the track at 9 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning, and the race not that night. But I know all the ladies wouldn't get there till 6 o'clock that afternoon, so they always had a good time. And you know, that being said, it's just something they probably miss going to that race more than the men.
Gosh, there's so many. I tell you, it's there's so many memories out there, and you know, believe it or not, you know, my memory, one of my favorite memories, I say favorite, and loosely, I guess. I'd gotten a bad wreck, flipped my car several times down the back straightaway, and it looked very devastating. And actually, Charlie Powell's mother came after a race and came down. She was at the race that night, and she came down, and she was almost in tears, and you know, she said to me, if I can say this without getting broke up about it, you know, she said when everybody was quiet, she bowed her head and said a little prayer because she thought I was actually dead. So, and she came over there and said that to me, and the amount of times I've seen Charlie Powell's mother, I can't even count. I mean, I can't even say. I mean, I can't even say that, recall the time that I saw her, but I did see her that night. So that was probably my fondest memory, but kind of a bad memory in a way as far as the wreck is concerned. But the fact that she came over and shared her feelings with me was probably one of my fondest memories. And I have so much between me and my father racing together at the Summerville Speedway. We actually got to race together at the Speedway together, and I tell you, there's just so many, but that's probably one that really sticks out in my head.
I guess things could be worse. And I hope you'd agree. And I hope you'd agree.
I arrived 2 o'clock in the morning, and exactly 1 week later, Summerville was holding its last weekend of racing. And I didn't find out about that until it was all over, so I missed it. And I was heartbroken that I had actually been there in North Carolina and didn't know. I felt terrible. I've closed about 6 racetracks in my life, including the one I grew up at. And it just breaks my heart because I'll never see all those people together again in the context of being in the grandstands cheering for their favorite drivers, and all the pit crews standing outside of the fence rooting for their guy, their favorite guy. You know, the car that they worked on all week. It really, I don't know if I can swear, but it really pisses me off. When they close a racetrack, that's exactly how I feel. Even a track I read about that I never attended, I have pictures of most racetracks, and I still get mad. And it's sad. And we've had several close. You know, I-77 in South Carolina, Richburg. That was my favorite dirt track when I moved down here. And that closed about 6 years ago for good. They just announced it's never coming back. We lost Concord Motorsports Park, half-mile asphalt, high-banked oval. That's gone. It tears me up every time I hear of a racetrack, especially ones that I love. They were two of my favorite tracks in the South that were still here, still left, and they're gone. So, yeah, I get very upset.
Well, at that time, when the Speedway was actually closing down, I'd moved on and I was racing elsewhere and doing some different things. And first off, I couldn't believe it because, you know, we just had, you know, I grew up there, and a lot of kids grew up there that actually turned out to be drivers and moved on to other things in motorsports. It was devastating in a way, but at the same time, it just was a little bit unbelievable because so many things in our life, in everybody's life at that time, was changing, and the growth in our area has been unbelievable, and it was just another sad thought for me to think that such an icon, which is Summerville Speedway, was going to be no more. So it was devastating in a way. I can remember I took my wife out there in a little BMW, and the track right before they tore it down, the gate was open. I went out there and made a few laps. Got my little fix there. My wife about clawed my eyes out, but I did get to take a few laps in a regular car around the racetrack right before they tore it down. So that meant something to me, and I'll always remember that.
I felt like I had lost a family friend. Felt like I had lost a family member. I was very bitter, very sour, very depressed. It was very depressing for something to be such a huge part of your life for so many years, and then you wake up one morning and it's no longer. That was very bitter.
Well, I'd have to say my next trip to South Carolina, to the Charleston area, I know how sad I'm going to be, because I'll be thinking about the time I was in the Navy, and I got introduced to Summerville Speedway, and now all those people are either not with us at all, they're gone, and today's kids are growing up without a racetrack there. In fact, there's no racetrack within 60 or 70 miles of the whole Summerville area. And as a race car brat, I think everybody's really missing out. The kids are missing out. The families are missing out. The racers are missing out. And it's a whole culture. And that's one reason I came to Charlotte. Because I know if we lost one or two tracks, which we have, we still have quite a few more. You know, we can meet the same kind of people that we are. We love racing. We love reading about it and photography with it and the videos. And we still have our favorite drivers. And I go to a community with no racetrack. I know there's something missing. There's something plausible that just isn't there. You know, you can have Little League, but auto racing was always more important to me than playing baseball. As much as I love baseball, I had to get to that racetrack on Saturday night. And Summerville, the people in Summerville don't have that opportunity, and most people probably aren't even aware that there was a racetrack. And I think that's sad. And we've got to have people remember that racetrack.
when you speak the word Summerville Speedway, you have to, Charlie Powell, synonymous with Summerville Speedway. The announcer, track announcer, Dan Moon, that was Summerville Speedway. Dan's voice coming over that every Saturday night for so many years. Those things that will be embedded in everybody that would come here on Saturday nights. Charlie Powell's tireless effort to make this one of the premier short tracks, too, is something that I think gets overlooked a lot. He was promoted a year several times. He was the guy, the go-to guy for short tracks all over the country that were NASCAR sanctioned. I met my wife here. My mother-in-law raced. My daddy raced. I raced. My father-in-law raced. Some of the best friends I had ever made. And number one to all that is my dad, still his best friend today, 50 years later. We all met, and I have a whole family that we're at Christmas together, all because of this racetrack, all because of the common ground that we so loved, short track racing here in the Low Country. And Charlie Powell allowed that to happen. Love or hate, the things that went on through the years, it was a gathering place. I can't state that enough, for everybody who loved racing. And some of the best racing, some of the best shows that you would ever see all through this country were right here in this little 35-acre lot that we're standing in the middle of. That's now a neighborhood.
Well, it's I was glad to be part of the history of the racetrack. I mean, you had to find out about me some way or another, so you looked up, and my name is in the history book there, winning races there, and I know the track's gone, but the history of the track will always be there. My name will be mentioned in the history of the track, so, and I think that's a pretty cool thing, because we're all just what I call Saturday night race car drivers, and it's good to know that your name is in the history book of something like that will always be around. The history of that speedway will always be talked about, even 20 or 30 years now, when people will be looking through magazines or new articles or whatever you are doing, and my name will be mentioned that, and I think it's a pretty cool thing.
Well, we talked about earlier about so many memories that we had from Summerville and the Speedway and the relationships and stuff that was built there. I was very fortunate to have so many memories of my father and Charlie and little Charles and Robert and Sean and all of us. We all kind of grew up together, but and so many other people there. I spent here 10 minutes naming off names, but the fact that right before Charlie passed, probably a year before Charlie passed, Charlie and I got to, I quit racing for about 10 or 15 years and started back running these little Legends cars with my buddy Dennis Brown, and we started going to Florence to test those little cars, and so I got to kind of rekindle my relationship with Charlie a little bit, because Charlie and I have had so many, we've had a lot of good times and good memories, and we've had bad memories. I'm sure everybody's done the same thing there, or has the same feeling there. But I got to rekindle my relationship with Charlie, which I lost my dad about 8 years ago, and Charlie and my daddy had a lot of stories together. And so we go up there and test it at Florence, where Charlie was at, and talked about some of the Speedway memories, Summerville Speedway memories, and I was fortunate enough to have Rafe Judd and Mr. Judd there, and then Charlie, and we'd go up there and test for all day long. We'd sit around afterwards and have a couple cold adult beverages, and we'd sit around and had Charlie there, and Rafe's daddy there, and me and Rafe, and we just rekindled so many memories. And it was kind of a cool deal for me, because I got a little bit of my daddy back just by talking to Charlie, and it's really cool. The first couple times we went there, and after we got finished talking, and half of Summerville Speedway probably won't believe this, but Charlie Powell and I actually hugged the first couple times we left the racetrack after that. So that was pretty cool, and it was a very, very sad deal when Charlie passed, and he meant a lot to a lot of people, and good and bad. And but there was some. I was so fortunate to be able to rekindle that relationship right before he passed. So that meant a lot to me, and Summerville Speedway meant a lot to me. The people that's helped me over the years was just amazing. The loyalty they had to me, and the fans. Lord knows the fans were unbelievable. And I know when that racetrack closed that it took a lot of heart and soul from a lot of people in the area that racetrack wasn't there for them to go to every night anymore, every Saturday night. But hopefully in the years to come, hopefully something will come back to this area and we can rekindle the racing community in the Low Country area. That's what I'm wishing for anyway.
I think the important thing to remember about Summerville Speedway is in many minds it's going to be cast in the light of its final days. Low car counts, fewer people in the stands, sponsorship money is drying up, tracks left and right are falling to development. I mean, and I think that unfortunately that's what many people are going to think it was, and it was nothing of the sort for the vast majority of its history. Again, there were few cars in the South, few tracks in the Southeast, if not the nation, at Summerville's level, that at one point had more cars per class. You would have Dale Earnhardt, Rusty Wallace, Kyle Petty come to Summerville and sometimes race with the local guys before they would go to Darlington. And you would get huge crowds for those. This is before my time, but Charlie Powell would tell stories about those kinds of nights. So I mean, there was a moment in time, and not a small one, when Summerville Speedway was a massive presence on Charleston's sporting landscape. And I think that a lot of that's been forgotten because of what it was like at the end for Summerville Speedway. But those final days are not indicative of what the place was like for most of its lifetime. And a lot of the guys who raced there to the very end will still tell you that, man, there were days where there was no short track in America that was more in demand than Summerville was. And that's what Summerville Speedway was to those guys, not this kind of track on its last few days. It was a place that was as prosperous as almost any other short track in America.
Looking down a road once, down the